Learning to write. It is by reading that one learns to write. This is the very type of synthetic formula that holds many truths within, but one that, from being so repeated, ends up standing on its own as a fetish, emptied of those valuable contents that, to be grasped, would require the formula to be denied and relativized, dialectically, rather than accepted blindly. Reading, yes, but reading what? And is it enough to read, or is it necessary to do something more with what is read? When the formula replaces these two questions instead of raising them, it is no longer worth anything. The selection of readings presupposes many readings, and there would be no way out of this vicious circle without distinguishing two types. Mere inspection readings lead to the selection of a certain number of titles for attentive and in-depth reading. It is the latter that teaches one to write, but one cannot reach it without the former. The former, in turn, presupposes search and consultation. Therefore, there is no serious reading without mastery of chronologies, bibliographies, encyclopedias, and general historical reviews. A person who has never read a book cover to cover, but from so much scouring through indexes and archives, has acquired a systemic vision of what they should read in the coming years, is already a more cultured individual than someone who has, off the bat, plunged into the Divine Comedy or the Critique of Pure Reason, without knowing where they came from or why they are reading them. But there is also what, if I'm not mistaken, Borges said: to understand a single book, one must have read many books. The art of reading is a simultaneous operation on two planes, like in a portrait, where the painter must work on the details in the foreground and the lines in the background at the same time. The difference between the cultured reader and the uncultured one is that the latter takes the current language of the media and everyday conversations as the background, a unidimensional reference framework in which all that is subtle and profound, personal and significant in a writer is lost. The other has more points of comparison because, knowing the tradition of the art of writing, they speak the language of writers, which is never everyone's language, no matter how much even some good writers, mistaken about themselves, think it is. There is no such thing as everyone's language. There are the languages of regions, groups, families, and there are the general codifications that formalize them synthetically. One such codification is the language of the media. It operates through statistical reduction and the establishment of standardized phrases which, by repetition, acquire automatic functionality. Another, its opposite, is literary art. This pursues the utilization of richer and more meaningful expressions, capable of conveying what would otherwise be difficult to express. The language of the media or the public square quickly and functionally repeats what everyone already knows. The language of writers makes expressible something that, without them, could barely be perceived. The former delimits a collective horizon of perception within which all, by perceiving the same things in the same way and with no effort of attention, believe they perceive everything. The latter opens up, for attentive individuals, knowledge of things that had been perceived before them only by those who paid close attention. It also establishes a community of perception, but not the one of the public square. It is that of attentive men and women from all eras and places, the community that Schiller called children of Jupiter. This community does not gather physically like masses in a stadium, nor statistically like the community of consumers and voters. Its members communicate only through the reflections sent, from time to time, by the eyes of solitary souls that shine in the dark vastness, like the lights of farms and villages, seen at night from an airplane window. One, finally, is the language of false obviousness. The other is that of authentic personal perceptions. As Saul Bellow put it, many mad scientists, including our literature professors, claim there is no difference. But the only scientific method they rely on to make this claim is the argumentum ad ignorantiam, the silliest of sophistic tricks, which consists of deducing, from their own ignorance of something, the objective non-existence of that thing. Literary language does exist, if only because great writers read each other, learn from each other, and like any other community of craft, have their traditions of learning, passwords, and initiation codes. Denying this historical fact because it cannot be deduced from Saussure's rules is like denying the existence of atomic particles because of the impossibility of knowing both their speed and position at the same time. The selection of reading should be guided above all by the desire to grasp, in the variety of what is read, the unwritten rules of this universal code that unites Shakespeare to Homer, Dante to Faulkner, Camillo to Sophocles and Euripides, Eliot to Confucius and Jalala ed-Din Rumi. Understood this way, reading has something of an initiatory adventure. It is the conquest of the lost word that grants access to the keys of a hidden realm. Outside of this, it is professional routine, pedantry, or puerile entertainment. But acquiring the code requires, in addition to reading, active absorption. It is necessary for you, beyond merely listening, to practice the language of the writer you are reading. To practice in Old Portuguese also means to converse. If you are reading Dante, try writing like Dante. Translate excerpts from him, imitate his tone, symbolic allusions, manner, worldview. Imitation is the only way to deeply assimilate. If it is impossible for you to learn English or Spanish just by listening, without ever trying to speak, why would it be different with the style of writers? The current fetishism of originality and creativity inhibits the practice of imitation. It demands that learners create out of nothing or solely from the language of the media. At most, they manage to produce creatively standardized banalities. No one achieves originality without mastering the technique of imitation. Imitating will not make you a servile idiot. First, because no servile idiot rises to the level of being able to imitate the greats, and second, because by imitating one, then another and another and yet another, you will not end up resembling any of them, but by composing from what you learned from them, your personal arsenal of ways of expression will ultimately be yourself, only enriched and ennobled by the weapons you acquired. It is in this sense, and only this sense, that by reading learns to write. It is a reading that presupposes the selective pursuit of unity behind variety, learning through active imitation and the ongoing development of a personal repertoire. Many who pose as writers today have not only never undergone this learning process, but do not even imagine it exists. But without it, everything is barbarism and industrialized inculture. O Globo, February 3, 2001, Olavo de Carvalho.